My name is Sophie. I am 28 years old. I live in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago called Lincoln Park. It is a peaceful place. The streets are clean. Tall trees stand along the sidewalks. There are small coffee shops, bookstores, and friendly neighbors who smile when they pass by. Many people say, I have a good life. I have a husband. I have a comfortable apartment. I have a stable job at a small bookstore. From the outside, my life looks calm and happy, but inside my heart, things are very different. Every morning, I wake up with a heavy feeling in my chest. I look at the ceiling for a few minutes before I get out of bed. Sometimes I ask myself the same question. How did my life become like this? The truth is simple. 1 year ago, I made a mistake. A big mistake. I married a man named David. David is 33 years old. He is a very kind man. He is gentle and patient. He speaks in a soft voice. He smiles often, even on difficult days. Most women would feel lucky to have a husband like him. But I do not feel lucky because I do not love him. I know it sounds terrible to say that. Sometimes I feel like a bad person for thinking it, but it is the truth. I did not marry David because of love. I married him because I was sad and angry. Before David, there was another man in my life. His name was Ryan. Ryan was my boyfriend for 3 years. I loved him deeply. I believed we would get married one day. I believed we would build a future together. But one day, everything changed. Ryan told me he did not love me anymore. He said he wanted a different life, a new start in another city, a new start without me. His words broke my heart. For weeks, I could not eat well. I could not sleep well. My mind was always full of pain and questions. Why did he leave me? Was I not good enough? Was our love not real? During that time, David appeared in my life. David was a friend from work. He worked in a small office near the bookstore where I worked. Sometimes he visited the store during lunch breaks. He was always kind to me. When Ryan left, David noticed my sadness. He often asked if I was okay. Sometimes he brought me coffee. Sometimes he stayed and talked with me for a few minutes. He listened to me without judgment. Slowly, he became someone I trusted. One evening, we walked together after work. The sky was orange and pink. The wind was cool. David looked at me and said something unexpected. Sophie, he said softly, I know your heart is hurting, but you are a wonderful person. Anyone would be lucky to have you. I did not know what to say. Then he said something even more surprising. I care about you a lot. Maybe we could build something together. At that moment, my heart was still broken. My mind was confused. I wanted to stop feeling pain. So when David asked me to marry him a few months later, I said yes. I thought marriage would help me forget Ryan. I thought a new life would heal my heart. I thought love would grow later. But love never came. Now 1 year has passed since our wedding. David is still the same kind man he was before. Every Friday, he brings me flowers. Sometimes they are roses, sometimes they are yellow tulips. Sometimes they are simple white daisies. He puts them on the kitchen table and says, "These are for you, Sophie." When I feel tired after work, he cooks dinner. He is actually a very good cook. He likes making pasta, soup, and warm bread with butter. Sometimes he writes small notes and puts them inside my lunch bag. The notes say things like, "Have a wonderful day. You make my life brighter. You are my sunshine." When I find those notes at work, I feel something strange. Not happiness, not love, only guilt. David calls me his sunshine. But the truth is, I feel like a cloud in his sky. At night, before we sleep, he often kisses my forehead. "Good night, my love," he whispers. I whisper, "Good night back." But inside my heart, something feels empty. One warm evening, we sat together on the balcony of our apartment. The city lights were glowing softly. Cars moved slowly on the street below. The air smelled like summer. David looked up at the sky. "The stars are beautiful tonight," he said. I nodded quietly. After a moment, he looked at me with gentle eyes. "Sophie," he said, "I know something." My heart beat a little faster. "What do you know?" I asked. He smiled softly. "I know you don't love me yet." His words surprised me. I did not expect him to say that, but before I could answer, he continued speaking. "It's okay," he said. "Love takes time sometimes." He reached for my hand. "I believe one day you will love me. I can wait. My love is strong enough for both of us." When I heard those words, my chest felt tight. I wanted to cry. David was full of hope, but inside me there was no hope at all. I squeezed his hand and forced a small smile. "Thank you for being patient," I said quietly. But inside my mind, another voice whispered, "What if love never comes?" That night, after David fell asleep, I stayed awake for a long time. I stared at the ceiling in the dark room. The soft sound of his breathing filled the silence. David looked peaceful while he slept. He trusted me. He believed in our future. And that made my heart hurt even more because I felt like I was living a lie. During the day, I smiled at him. I thanked him for the flowers. I ate the dinners he cooked. I held his hand when we walked outside. But deep inside, I felt like I was playing a role in a story that did not belong to me. Sometimes I remembered my mother's words. She once told me, "Love can grow with time. Marriage is not only about strong feelings, it is about kindness and patience." I tried to believe her. I really tried, but every day my heart felt more distant from David. Every day I felt more like a stranger in my own life. One Friday evening, David prepared a special dinner for me. The table was decorated with candles. Soft music played from the small speaker in the living room. He cooked my favorite dish, chicken pasta with garlic bread. He even wore the blue shirt I once told him I liked. When I came home from work, he smiled proudly. "This is for you, Sophie," he said. "You are my everything." I sat down at the table and looked at him. He looked so happy, so full of love. I smiled politely and said, "Thank you." But inside my heart, I felt completely empty. I looked at the candles, the food, the music. Everything was perfect, but something inside me was missing. Something very important. Love. And slowly I began to understand a painful truth. I had built a life that looked beautiful on the outside, but inside my heart was still lost. At first, I told myself that everything would get better with time. People always say that love can grow slowly. They say marriage is not always about passion. Sometimes it begins with kindness, respect, and patience. David had all of those things. He was patient. He was gentle. He was loyal. Every day he showed me the kind of love many people dream about. But my heart remained quiet. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a full year of marriage. Our life followed the same calm routine. In the morning, David woke up earlier than me. I often smelled coffee before I even opened my eyes. He always prepared breakfast. Toast, eggs, and sometimes pancakes on weekends. "Good morning, Sophie," he would say with a warm smile. I always answered politely. "Good morning." We ate together at the small kitchen table near the window. Sunlight usually filled the room, making everything look peaceful and warm. After breakfast, we left for work together. Sometimes we walked, sometimes we took the bus. David always carried my bag if it looked heavy. At work, my coworkers often talked about my husband. "You are so lucky," one of them said once while we organized books on the shelf. "Your husband sounds amazing." I smiled, but my smile felt stiff. "Yes, he's very kind," I replied. And that was true. David was incredibly kind. The problem was never him. The problem was me. One evening after work, I walked home alone because David had to stay late at his office. The sky was dark and the streetlights were glowing softly. As I passed a small park near our apartment, I heard laughter. A young couple was sitting on a bench. They were sharing ice cream and talking happily. The girl leaned on the boy's shoulder while he gently brushed her hair away from her face. They looked deeply in love. Watching them made something inside my chest ache. I realized something in that quiet moment. I had never looked at David the way that girl looked at her boyfriend. Not even once. When I arrived home, the apartment felt unusually quiet. I sat on the couch and stared around the living room. Everything there was chosen together. Our sofa, the small bookshelf, the framed pictures on the wall. One of the photos showed us on our wedding day. David was smiling brightly. I was smiling too. But now, looking at the photo, my smile looked different. It looked forced. When David came home an hour later, he looked tired but happy to see me. "Sorry I'm late," he said while taking off his coat. "Work was busy today." "That's okay," I replied. He walked over and kissed my forehead like he always did. "Did you eat dinner?" he asked. "Not yet." "Perfect," he said cheerfully. "Let's cook together." Cooking together was something he loved. For him, it was a moment of closeness. For me, it was another moment where I had to pretend everything was normal. We stood side by side in the kitchen. David chopped vegetables while I stirred the soup on the stove. He hummed a quiet song while working. Sometimes he looked at me and smiled. "Sophie," he said suddenly. Next month is our anniversary. I nodded slowly. 1 year, he continued. Time moves so fast. Yes, it does. I was thinking, maybe we could take a short trip, he said. Maybe somewhere near the lake, just the two of us. His eyes were full of excitement. That sounds nice, I said softly, but deep inside I felt nervous. An anniversary should feel special, but to me it felt like another reminder of a lie I was living. That night, after dinner, we watched television together. David laughed at the comedy show we were watching. Sometimes he looked at me to see if I was laughing too. I laughed a little, but my mind was somewhere else. Later, when we went to bed, David held my hand gently. Sophie, he whispered in the dark, are you happy? His question made my heart jump. I stayed silent for a moment. Yes, I finally said. It was a small word, a simple word, but it felt heavy in my mouth. David squeezed my hand softly. That makes me happy, he said before falling asleep. But I stayed awake again. I stared into the darkness, listening to the quiet sounds of the city outside the window. My thoughts were loud in my mind. Why can't I love him? Why does my heart stay empty even though he gives me everything? I remembered Ryan again. Not because I still loved him, but because he had changed something inside me. After he left, a part of my heart had closed. And now David was loving someone who was only half open. The next morning, something unexpected happened. I received a message from an unknown number. The message was short. Hi, Sophie, it's Ryan. My heart immediately started beating faster. I stared at the phone for a long time. Ryan, the man who broke my heart. The man who disappeared from my life a year ago. And now he was suddenly back. Another message appeared on the screen. Can we talk? My hands felt cold as I stared at the phone screen. Ryan, a name I had not seen in over a year. For a long moment, I didn't move. My mind filled with memories I had tried very hard to bury. Memories of long walks, shared dreams, and promises that once felt unbreakable. And then memories of the day he left. The message on my phone remained there, simple and quiet. Can we talk? I locked the phone and placed it face down on the table. My heart was beating faster than usual, and I didn't like the feeling. David was in the kitchen making coffee. Sophie, he called. Do you want sugar in your coffee today? Yes, I answered automatically. I walked to the kitchen slowly, trying to act normal. David handed me a warm mug and smiled the way he always did. Big day at the bookstore? He asked. Not really, I said. But my mind wasn't in the kitchen. It was still staring at that message. Ryan, why was he contacting me now? What could he possibly want after disappearing from my life? I forced myself to focus on the present, on the man standing in front of me, on the husband who had spent the past year loving me without hesitation. David noticed my silence. You seem tired today, he said gently. Just didn't sleep well, I replied. He nodded with concern. Maybe try to rest after work. His kindness made the guilt inside me heavier. After breakfast, we left the apartment together. As always, we walked part of the way before our paths separated. His office was 3 blocks before the bookstore. When we reached the corner, he stopped. "Have a good day, Sophie," he said. "You too." He leaned forward and kissed my forehead before heading down the street. I watched him walk away for a moment, then I pulled out my phone. The message from Ryan was still there. My thumb hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it forever, but another part of me needed answers. Finally, I typed a short reply. "What do you want to talk about?" The response came almost immediately. "Everything." My stomach tightened. A second message followed. "I'm in Chicago for a few days. Can we meet?" I stared at the words. For a long time, I didn't answer. At work that day, I couldn't concentrate. I tried to organize books, help customers, and restock the shelves, but my thoughts kept drifting. Ryan was in the same city. The past I thought was finished was suddenly standing right outside the door. During lunch break, I sat in the small staff room behind the store. My phone rested on the table in front of me. Finally, I typed another message. "One coffee, that's all." Ryan replied again. "Thank you." We agreed to meet that evening at a small cafe near the park. The rest of the day felt strangely long. When my shift ended, I stood outside the bookstore for a moment, staring at the street. The sky was beginning to turn orange as the sun started to set. For a brief second, I thought about canceling, but my feet started moving anyway. The cafe was quiet when I arrived. Soft music played in the background, and only a few people sat at the tables. Ryan was already there. I recognized him immediately. He looked almost the same, but slightly older. His hair was shorter, and there were faint lines near his eyes that hadn't been there before. When he saw me, he stood up. "Sophie." Hearing my name in his voice again felt strange. "Hi," I said quietly as I sat down. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Ryan sighed. "You look good," he said. "Thanks." Another silence followed. Finally, I decided to speak first. "Why did you contact me?" Ryan looked down at the table before answering. "I made a mistake," he said. I almost laughed. "A mistake?" He nodded slowly. "Leaving you?" The words felt like something from a different life. "I thought I wanted something else," he continued. "A different city, a different career, a different future." And I asked. "And it wasn't what I thought it would be." I crossed my arms slightly. "So now you came back." "I came back because I realized something too late," he said. I didn't respond. Ryan looked directly into my eyes. "I never stopped thinking about you." The words hung in the air between us. A year ago, hearing those words would have meant everything to me. Now they only made me feel tired. "You broke my heart, Ryan," I said quietly. "I know. You left without even trying to fix things." "I know," he repeated. "And now you appear again like nothing happened." Ryan rubbed his hands together nervously. I heard you got married. Yes. He nodded slowly. Are you happy? That question again. The same question David had asked me. For a moment, I didn't know how to answer. Ryan watched my face carefully. You hesitated, he said softly. That's not your business. He leaned forward slightly. Sophie, if you're not happy, you don't have to stay. Something inside me immediately resisted his words. You don't get to say that, I replied firmly. Why not? Because you gave up the right to be part of my life. Ryan looked like he wanted to argue, but he stopped himself. I'm sorry, he said again, but apologies couldn't rewrite the past. After a few minutes, I stood up. This meeting was a mistake. Sophie, wait. I looked at him one last time. I hope you find whatever you're looking for, I said. Then I walked out of the cafe. The evening air outside felt cool against my face. The city lights were starting to glow as night slowly arrived. As I walked home, my mind was quieter than it had been all day. Seeing Ryan again had not brought back love. It had brought clarity. The past was exactly where it belonged, behind me. When I reached our apartment building, I saw the kitchen light on through the window. David was already home, probably cooking dinner again. I stood outside the door for a moment before going in, because for the first time in a long while, I realized something important. The real question was no longer about Ryan. The real question was about my marriage, and whether I was finally ready to face the truth about it. I stood outside the apartment door for a long moment before unlocking it. My hand rested on the handle, but my mind was racing. Seeing Ryan again had stirred many memories, but it had also done something unexpected. It showed me that the love I once felt for him was truly gone. The pain he caused had healed, but the emptiness inside my marriage was still there. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The warm smell of garlic and butter filled the apartment. David was in the kitchen again, standing over the stove with a wooden spoon in his hand. When he saw me, his face immediately brightened. Sophie, you're home. He turned off the stove and walked toward me with that familiar, gentle smile. I tried a new recipe today, he said excitedly. I hope you like it. I placed my bag down slowly. Thank you, I said. David studied my face carefully. You look tired, he said softly. Long day? Yes, something like that. He didn't ask more questions. That was one thing about David. He never pushed when I looked uncomfortable. Come sit, he said. Dinner is ready. We sat at the small kitchen table together. The candles were lit again, just like many nights before. The food looked delicious. David always tried so hard. I watched him as he served the pasta onto my plate. He looked peaceful, happy, as if loving me was the easiest thing in the world. For a moment, a heavy weight pressed against my chest, because I knew something he didn't. Tonight, my thoughts had changed. Not because of Ryan, but because I finally understood something about myself. David looked up and noticed my quiet expression. Is the food okay? He asked. Yes, it's good. but I hadn't really tasted it. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Finally, David spoke again. "I was thinking about our anniversary trip," he said. "Maybe we could go to that little lake town you mentioned once?" I slowly put down my fork. "David." My voice made him pause. "Yes?" I looked at him carefully. Kind eyes, gentle smile. A man who had done nothing wrong, and that made this even harder. "There's something we need to talk about." His smile faded slightly, replaced by concern. "Okay," he said quietly. I took a deep breath. "I met someone today." David didn't react immediately. "Someone from work?" he asked. "No." The silence grew heavier. "It was Ryan." The name hung in the air like a sudden storm. David's expression changed, but not in anger, just surprise. "Oh?" That was all he said at first. He looked down at the table for a moment before speaking again. "Did he contact you?" "Yes." "And you went to see him?" It wasn't a question. "Yes." David nodded slowly, absorbing the information. Then he asked softly, "Why?" "Because I needed closure." He looked back up at me. "And did you get it?" "Yes." Another quiet moment passed between us. David's voice remained calm when he spoke again. "Do you still love him?" "No." That answer came easily. David searched my face carefully, as if trying to see something hidden. Then he asked the question I had been afraid of. "Then why do you look so sad?" My chest tightened. Because the truth was finally standing right in front of us. "It's not about Ryan," I said. "Then what is it about?" I felt my hands trembling slightly on the table. "It's about us." David didn't move. For a few seconds, the room felt completely silent. "I've been trying for a year," I continued softly, "trying to feel something that never came." David's eyes slowly lowered. "You mean love?" "Yes." The word felt heavy but honest. He stayed quiet for a long time. I could almost hear his heart breaking in the silence. "I thought if I was patient," he said quietly. "I know. I thought if I loved you enough, one day you might feel the same." My throat felt tight. "I wanted to," I said. "I really did." David gave a small, sad smile. "You're a kind person, Sophie. I could see you trying, but trying isn't the same as loving someone." "No," he agreed softly. The candles on the table flickered gently. Finally, David asked the question that mattered most. "Are you saying you want to leave?" I closed my eyes for a moment because saying the truth out loud would change everything. When I opened them again, I nodded. "Yes." And David leaned back slightly in his chair. He looked hurt but not angry, and that made the moment even more painful. "I see," he said quietly. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "You don't have to apologize for being honest." Tears slowly filled my eyes. "You deserve someone who truly loves you." David looked down at his hands. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he nodded once. "You're right." His voice sounded calm, but I could hear the sadness beneath it. "I always knew this was a possibility," he admitted. "You did?" "Yes." I looked at him with surprise. "Then why did you still marry me?" David smiled gently. "Because loving you felt worth the risk." A tear slipped down my cheek. "I wish I could give you the love you deserve." He looked back at me with tired but kind eyes. Sometimes love doesn't work the way we want it to. We sat in silence again. Two people who had shared a home for a year. Two people who had tried to build something together. But something important had always been missing. Finally, David stood up and quietly blew out the candles. The small flames disappeared, leaving the room dim and quiet. "I think we both know what happens next," he said. And deep in my heart, I knew he was right. That night, the apartment felt different. It was the same place, the same walls, the same furniture, the same quiet street outside the window. But something had changed between us. Something that could not be undone. David and I sat in the living room for a long time after dinner. The television was off. The room was quiet except for the faint sound of cars passing outside. Neither of us knew what to say next. Finally, David spoke. "When did you realize?" he asked gently. I looked down at my hands. "I think I always knew," I admitted. "But I kept hoping it would change." David nodded slowly. I hoped the same thing. His honesty made my chest tighten again. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said. "I know." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You're not hurting me by telling the truth," he continued. "What would hurt more is living in a lie." His words were calm, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. A year of quiet hope had just come to an end. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I'll move out," I said softly. "I'll find another place." "You don't have to rush," he replied. "Take your time." I shook my head. "It will be easier if I leave soon." David thought about that for a moment. Then he nodded. "Okay." That was the moment our marriage truly ended. Not with shouting, not with anger, just with quiet understanding. That night, we slept in separate rooms for the first time. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed the past year like a long film. All the mornings with coffee, all the dinners David cooked, all the flowers he brought home. He had given me kindness every single day, and I had given him only half a heart. The next morning felt strangely calm. When I woke up, sunlight was already filling the living room. I heard movement in the kitchen. David was making breakfast again. For a moment, I wondered if everything yesterday had been a dream. But when I walked into the kitchen, the quiet distance between us reminded me it was real. "Morning," he said. "Morning." The word felt unfamiliar now. He placed a plate of toast on the table. "You should eat," he said. "Thank you." We sat across from each other in silence. The routine was the same, but the meaning behind it had changed. After breakfast, I began packing some of my things: clothes, books, small personal items. Each object I placed in the suitcase felt like closing a chapter. David stayed mostly in the bedroom, giving me space. Around noon, he came into the living room. "You don't have to take everything today," he said. "I know." I zipped up the suitcase. "I'll come back for the rest later." David nodded. He walked to the window and looked outside for a moment. "I meant what I said last night," he added quietly. "About what?" "About you deserving to find the life that makes you happy." His kindness still hadn't changed even now. "You deserve that too," I said. He gave a small smile. "I'll be okay." I believed him. David was the kind of person who could rebuild his life. Before leaving, I paused near the door. "David." He turned to look at me. "Thank you," I said. "For what?" "For loving me." His expression softened. "I always will," he replied. That answer made my chest ache. But sometimes love alone isn't enough. I picked up my suitcase and stepped outside. The air felt cool and fresh against my face. The street looked the same as always, but I felt like a different person walking down it. For the first time in a year, my life felt uncertain again. But it also felt honest. Over the next few months, everything changed. The divorce process was calm and respectful. There were no arguments, no bitterness, just two people who understood that their paths were meant to go in different directions. I found a small apartment closer to the bookstore. It wasn't as big as the old place, but it felt peaceful. Slowly, I began rebuilding my life. I focused on my work. I spent more time with friends. I started learning things I had always been curious about, like painting and photography. Little by little, I began to feel something new. Freedom. Not the careless kind of freedom Ryan once chased, but a quiet freedom. The freedom to be honest with myself. Years passed. Life moved forward in ways I could never have predicted. I worked harder at the bookstore, eventually becoming the manager. Later, I opened a small bookstore cafe of my own. The business grew slowly, but it became successful. My life was full again. Not because of romance, but because I had finally built something real. 3 years later, one rainy afternoon, I was walking through a busy street downtown after closing the cafe early. People hurried past with umbrellas as rain fell steadily from the gray sky. That was when I saw him. Ryan. At first, I almost didn't recognize him. His clothes were worn. His hair looked unkempt. He stood near a trash bin behind a small restaurant, searching for something inside, for scraps of food. For a moment, I simply watched from across the street. Life had taken him somewhere very different from where he once imagined. He looked up suddenly. Our eyes met. Recognition flashed across his face. For a second, neither of us moved. Then something strange happened. I smiled at him. Not with anger, not with sadness, just a calm, quiet smile. The same kind of smile he once gave me when he walked away from my life years ago. Ryan looked surprised, but I didn't stop walking. I turned and continued down the street, the rain falling softly around me because my life was no longer behind me. It was ahead of me, and I was finally ready to keep moving forward. The rain continued to fall as I walked down the street. Cold drops touched my face, mixing with the quiet rhythm of the city around me. People rushed past with umbrellas, cars splashed through small puddles, and the soft sound of rain filled the air. But inside me, everything felt calm. For a long time, I had imagined what it would feel like to see Ryan again. I thought maybe I would feel anger, maybe sadness, maybe regret. But I felt none of those things. Only peace. Seeing him there, searching through the trash behind a restaurant, showed me something very important. Life has its own way of teaching people lessons. Sometimes those lessons come slowly. Sometimes they come painfully. But eventually, everyone must face the consequences of the choices they make. Ryan once chose to walk away from love because he believed something better was waiting somewhere else. And maybe for a while he believed he was right, but life had taken him somewhere different. I didn't stop walking. I didn't look back because my story was no longer connected to his. When I reached the end of the street, I opened my umbrella and continued toward my car. The rain was heavier now, tapping gently against the fabric above me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from one of my employees at the cafe. "Everything is ready for tomorrow's book event. The new shipment of novels arrived." I smiled. The cafe had become more than just a business. It had become a place where people came to relax, read, and share stories. Every weekend, we hosted small reading events where local writers shared their work. Sometimes when I looked around the cafe, I felt proud of how far I had come. 3 years ago, I left my marriage feeling uncertain about everything. But that decision forced me to face my life honestly, and that honesty helped me grow. When I arrived home, the rain had finally started to slow. My apartment was warm and quiet. I placed my umbrella near the door and made a cup of tea. As I sat near the window, watching the last drops of rain slide down the glass, my thoughts drifted to David. We hadn't spoken often after the divorce, but we had stayed respectful toward each other. About a year after we separated, I heard through a mutual friend that David had started dating someone new, a woman who worked at a nearby hospital. From what I heard, she was kind, cheerful, and admired his gentle personality. That news had made me genuinely happy because David deserved someone who could truly love him. Someone who would see his kindness and return it with a full heart. And I knew he would make someone very happy someday. I took a sip of my tea and leaned back in my chair. Sometimes people believe that a story must have villains and heroes, but real life is rarely that simple. Ryan wasn't evil. He was selfish and careless with my heart, but he simply followed his own desires without thinking about the consequences. David wasn't perfect either. He loved deeply, maybe too deeply, believing patience could create love where it didn't exist. And me, I was someone who made mistakes. I married a good man for the wrong reason, but eventually I found the courage to tell the truth. And sometimes the most important turning point in life is not falling in love. It's choosing honesty. A week after the rainy afternoon when I saw Ryan, something unexpected happened again. I was closing the cafe one evening when the door opened. A tall man stepped inside, shaking off the cold wind. For a second, I didn't recognize him, but then he smiled. Sophie? It was David. He looked almost the same, but somehow lighter, happier. David, I said with surprise. He looked around the cafe with interest. So this is the place everyone keeps talking about? I laughed softly. You've heard about it? Of course. People say it's the coziest cafe in the neighborhood. And he walked slowly around the room, looking at the shelves filled with books and the warm lights hanging from the ceiling. You built something beautiful here, he said. Thank you. We stood near the counter for a moment, both feeling a little shy. How have you been? I asked. Good, he said. Really good. He paused before continuing. I actually got married last year. I smiled immediately. That's wonderful. She's amazing, he said with a gentle laugh. She talks a lot more than you ever did. That made both of us laugh. But she makes me very happy, he added. I'm glad, I said sincerely. David looked at me for a moment. And you? I'm happy too. He nodded as if he could see the truth in my expression. After a few minutes of friendly conversation, he prepared to leave. Before walking out the door, he turned back. I'm really glad things worked out for both of us, he said. Me too. Then he left, disappearing into the quiet evening street. I locked the cafe door and turned off the lights one by one. As I stood there in the soft glow of the final lamp, I realized something. Life doesn't always give us the love story we imagined. Sometimes it gives us lessons instead. Lessons about honesty, lessons about courage, lessons about letting go. But if we learn from those lessons, something beautiful can grow from them. And as I stepped outside into the cool night air, I knew one thing for certain. My story was no longer about the past. It was about the life I had built with my own strength and the future that was still waiting ahead. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Learn English by Stories. We share new emotional and inspiring stories every single day to help you relax, learn English, and enjoy powerful life lessons. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done in her situation? And remember, sometimes the hardest choices lead us to the life we were meant to live. Subscribe to Learn English by Stories and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next story. A new story is waiting for you.